Welcome everybody to the OCD. This is my channel dedicated to everything OCD from the inside out, and by that I mean my experiences. I am not a clinical psychologist, I am not a healthcare professional, but I am a 35-year veteran of the condition, and this channel is my attempt to share my experiences and my coping mechanisms in the hope that it might help one or two people to cope themselves, because it is an incredibly debilitating condition and it is still a very misunderstood condition. So what I want to talk a little bit about today is the role that the inner child can play in the cycle of compulsions and rituals. I'm talking about my own experiences here, but my own inner child is something that I feel was stuck at a certain point and has been trying to protect itself, or protect me, ever since, by the use of these rituals and compulsions. Because there was a time when the compulsions first began, when they seemed like a good thing. They seemed like an answer to a very unhappy situation, and a little bit like a triptych, a painting in three parts. My own childhood trauma came in three parts at three different times, and all of it involved the loss of my lifestyle. And I don't mean lifestyle as in yachts and cigars. I mean a happy home, I mean parents who were there to support me, etc., etc. So regardless of whether or not I should have coped with it better, which some people may say, I coped with it my own way, which was by the development of obsessive compulsive disorder. What's really fascinating to me is that I had absolutely no idea, no way of knowing what obsessive compulsive disorder was at that time in my life. And yet my mind, my brain, my own psychology was already equipped with that little coping mechanism in its bag of tricks, like so many people. I can vividly remember forming my first rituals and believing, and at that point it was a choice. In those early stages it was a choice. Forming those early rituals and those early compulsions, the compulsions came afterwards, but the rituals in the first instance were my choice. They seemed to me a way of making me feel happier, which is very strange when I then grew up to find that this was a condition and that many, many people around the world suffer from it, and that once you are in that loop, in that trap, you can't get out, or it's very difficult to get out. But it is possible. I've done it myself. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not still plagued by the rituals and the compulsions. I am, but you can build a way of almost an antidote to them, and that's what this channel is about, is to try and put forward a few of my experiences, a few of my ideas, and a few of my coping mechanisms, in the hope that some of you might, if you want to, find them helpful as an antidote if you're struggling. So today is a strike day in the United Kingdom for teachers, and that means that my son is at home alone, which is not a problem. He's old enough to be home alone, and he's been home alone before, but it's a problem for me because obviously it fires all of my my little conditions, and even just sitting here now talking about it, I can feel it all unfolding in my mind, all of the possibilities, blah blah blah. I'm not going to let that happen, because it is self-defeatist, And that is part of what I want to talk about today, is not allowing the thought to take hold. The thought is in there, and the discomfort that immediately comes with the compulsion that people with OCD feel is in there. It's starting. I can feel it. And it's not pleasant. If I put all of my attention onto the discomfort, the thought will not develop. So, that's one of the things I want to talk about. The second thing that's making me jittery today is that, there's a particular person in my life who has bullied me a great deal over the years, since I was a child. And that particular person is always on the periphery of my life. And each morning, they're sort of my trigger for OCD. Each morning I think of that person first. And my first ritual, which is putting on my socks, is designed to stop that person from coming into my life that day. It sounds like an odd one, but the ritual, I'll share the ritual with you. It sounds crazy, they all do, but I have spotty socks, I have stripy socks. Now, if I wear spotty socks, that person will come into my life on that particular day. If I wear stripy socks, it will prevent them from coming into my life on that particular day. But here's the thing that I've learned over the years. I'm going to have a sip of coffee, if you wouldn't mind, because I feel stressed and I feel in need of one. So excuse me a moment. That's nice coffee. This is the truth of it. That person has come into my working day when I've had spotty socks and when I've had stripy socks on. So that ritual doesn't work. And this is the truth of it. So I can remember a time very, very vividly in my childhood when my OCD was at its worst during adolescence and late adolescence, when the compulsions and the rituals were so acute, so bad, that I couldn't get out of my chair in my bedroom. I had a wooden chair. I couldn't let my feet touch the floor. I couldn't let my hands touch any part of the chair. And I sat hunched, basically hugging my knees in that chair, and I could not move. And I was scared, very, very scared, because I knew that something had taken control of me that I was not able to fight. I didn't have anybody to talk to about it. There wasn't an internet in those days that you could go to. And I can remember asking, at the time my mum worked at a dispensary in the doctor's surgery, my doctor's surgery, and I didn't want her to know about it because, love my mum as I do, she had a tendency to become rather hysterical about things, and I couldn't cope with that on top of everything else. So I decided the best thing to do was talk to the next person in authority that I could think of, and that was my tutor at college, which was ineffective. To say it was ineffective is an understatement. Not his fault in any way. He was not equipped to deal with things like that. He didn't understand what I was talking about. And his advice was go to your doctor. And when I explained I couldn't, and I explained the reasons why, he said, well, you're going to have to go to your doctor. And so I kind of didn't get anywhere with that. But my point is that the OCD was acute, hugely acute. And it still is if I allow it to be. The things that trigger it, like my son being at home, like the person in my life who bullies me, still trigger it. And if you had told me during that day in the chair that none of the rituals work, I'm not quite sure what I would have done. But the truth is, the difficult truth is, that I can see now that I have perspective, the perspective of all of those years, is that none of the rituals work. And I've said this before, but it's true. It is a hard truth, and it doesn't mean that you immediately stop doing the rituals and everything's better. I'm not suggesting that you stop your rituals and the compulsions go away. I'm not suggesting that at all. But the knowledge of that fact, if you are able to sit and process it, is the beginning of making things better. It's the first step. Understanding that, unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because defying the compulsions feels like, oh my goodness, it feels like blasphemy, heresy, and everything else rolled into one. It would have been like telling a devout Catholic back in the 1500s that God didn't exist. It really would have, it's a problematic feeling. It's a problematic thought, and I get that. But the truth is, they don't work. They don't change anything, except to make your life harder, and except to make the rituals carry on. So, bear with me if you feel like, right, I'm turning this guy off because he isn't saying anything that I want to hear. Bear with me, okay? The whole point of those rituals, for me, was that I was protecting my inner child. I didn't realize that at the time, but that's what I was doing. I was very unhappy, deeply unhappy, after many years at that point, nearly 10 years, of my life spiraling into less and less and less from what felt like a very secure home, friends, school, all the rest of it, to my father leaving, losing the home, moving school, all of the things that trigger a child into feeling insecure. So at 14 years old, whatever it was 13, 14, 15, it was that age. I had the final one, which was I'm going to say it, it was my stepfather moving in. And that was like the final thing that just triggered the OCD. It triggered my need the OCD. It triggered my need to feel better. So, feeling better, soothing the wound of trauma, because trauma comes in many different aspects, and prolonged trauma, the drip of things just getting steadily worse and worse and worse. It's like having a wound that you keep picking at that never heals and eventually becomes infected and you can't heal it. And that's similar to how this is. And in order to make myself feel better, I developed a ritual that was revolved around a Hollywood movie that I had watched, with a story that I would have literally given a king's ransom to have been a part of, for it to have been my life. And the three main characters in that movie, I took on as protectors of me. I actively did that. I can remember doing it. And the original ritual was that I carried them around with me in spirit, and I could call each one up to help me, because each one's character was quite different, in different situations. But then the problem became holding on to them, because I discovered that if I tripped over a paving slab, let's say, I had an overwhelming feeling that they'd all popped out of me, and I had to gather them back in. And then I discovered that if I touched things, they, in my mind, stuck to the things I touched, so I had to gather them back into myself every time I touched anything. And then I discovered that if I walked past a mirror, they became stuck in the mirror whilst I walked on, so I had to gather them out of the mirror. Do you see where this is going? And from there it just spiraled and spiraled and spiraled, and my entire adolescence was spent trying to keep those three energies, let's call them energies, within me to help me when I found life difficult. And what do you know, they were actually, or that ritual was actually making life difficult. It spiraled from there. It got far worse, far worse, to the point where I couldn't even go to the toilet. I couldn't even urinate without having to gather them back in, and I'm not even going to go into that because that was just a whole other kind of crazy. Now I understand it wasn't crazy, but it was my mind, my young me, trying to protect me in that kind of way that you just have no idea what you're getting yourself into. What interests me greatly is that I actively sought that out initially. And then it became something that was so problematic that I couldn't deal with life. I couldn't deal with life. I think everybody probably understands what I mean by I couldn't deal with life, but I could not deal with life. So I understand that saying the rituals don't work in a kind of arrogant, strutting way, as I seem to be doing, does not appear to be helpful. But it is the first step if you can grasp it and meditate upon it and consider what that actually means. It is the first step. It is a tiny step because the power of this condition is immense. But it's the first step. So, protecting the inner child. I've talked to you about being stuck in the chair. All of the years that I wasted. I mean, I wasted all of my years. Because when I look back now, what was actually made better in my life by those rituals? Nothing. What did they prevent? Because I've been through some, as we all have, this life, incredibly hard knocks in my life. We all have. Even if we're still young, we've already been through some hard knocks, or we wouldn't be struggling with this condition. This condition itself is one of the hardest things I've ever dealt with in life. And support is the second thing. Understanding that thing about the ineffectiveness of the rituals is the first step, and support is the second step. Now, support is difficult because in my case I didn't have it at home. I had what my parents thought was support, but it was actually hysteria, and it wasn't helpful. It made everything worse. And I know that they were trying to help, but it didn't help. It was a horrible, horrible time. But I was very, very fortunate that I had a best friend whose family did offer me support, and they offered me a place to be, and they offered me a place to be me. And it was the second step. So support and understanding are the two keys to it, to hold on to those two things. And then there are various exercises we can do that will bring it down, bring the need, the compulsion need down. There is no way to just withdraw, to just stop. It would be like telling an alcoholic to just stop having a drink. You know, you can't just stop, because particularly if you've had these compulsions for a number of years, you will find, as I have found, that you are programmed in your subconscious mind. You find yourself doing them when you weren't even thinking, when your mind was switched off. So slow withdrawal and mindfulness is the technique, and I'm going to be talking about that in the next video. Okay, I'm going to be talking in the next video because I've been rambling on for far too long about how we can put that feeling of the compulsions back in its box. Slow withdrawal is possible from the rituals of OCD, and I know it's possible because I have done it. I've done it to a point where even when the rituals, the need, the compulsion to fulfill the rituals came up and the thought came up, it did not bother me. It had no power over me. And that's really what we're aiming for. And if I could help even one person to get to a point where the thoughts had no power over them and the rituals didn't matter to them, I would feel very, very happy. So in the next video, I'm going to talk about an exercise that you can do with the support of a friend, a member of the family. You can do it on your own, but it's better if you do it with some support, where you can put that awful feeling of the compulsions, that feeling under your skin, the feeling that rises in your chest of anxiety and fear, where if you avoid doing the ritual that the compulsion is telling you to do, this exercise is designed to bring you down, to bring your focus back, and to calm you down to a point that the thought passes, and then you move on. And then when it comes again, you do the same thing. So I'm going to sign off for now, but I am going to put that video together. I'm going to try and get it up for tomorrow, and I'm going to try and help. The problem of association is a big part of this, and I'm going to try and help you deal with that.